Well, it's been a really interesting few weeks here in Spokane. I got this cardigan at a store the other day. It's really comfy and cool. Um, but yeah, very interesting place. There's a river that runs through the middle of it and straight through the middle. And so, I went to a place yesterday where there's a bunch of bridges going over it. And, where I was, it's not enough that, jumping would kill the person, but the rushing water would, it's a very pretty river. It's turbulent where I was yesterday, translucent blue-green color, with various bridges, including, the posts and spots where former bridges used to be. And so, I started to wonder, in association with the markers about the 1889 fire, how much, because that's a tragedy, how much sort of, I guess, suicide would be committed in Spokane off those bridges. And so I researched into it, and it actually came up surprisingly short. Even though while in 2024, the city exceeded the norm of the entire state with a total of 120 recorded successful suicide acts committed, with an average of 21 per 100,000 residents, whereas the Washington state average as a whole is only about 14.8 per 100,000 people. But, then sized down from the whole state and solely Spokane statistics, the data shows most attempts occur on a place called the Monroe Bridge, with only around 400 since 2005, and a majority of them talked down, with only an average of 2.5 deaths a year, which makes up only about 4% of the actual suicide cases, out of roughly 300 hospitalizations a year. So it ebbs and flows with consistency, whereas the vast majority of suicides are enacted by majority self-inflicted gunshots followed by hanging, and with a more rapidly rising and increasing rate of overdoses. So yeah, that's an interesting thing I learned about Spokane, is the suicide statistics and stuff. And I wrote that's an article I was reading too. It's called Slippery Suicide. It's on Substack. Anyway, but yeah, it's a really cool river, and along it there's this, it basically goes all across the city, is this hiking path. It's paved. It's basically what the bike trail in Tucson or Pima County was for me. And anyway, so I was there walking the other day. There's pine cones falling from the tree I'm under. It's very cool. Anyway, I wrote a poem in association with this walking out and about. I didn't name it because I didn't think of a name. It was just sort of heat of the moment, as the song by Asia goes. So anyway, lunar obscured limelight, cloud-covered memories, pale white light and black sky, gray spots and silver dots, red blinking planes, drones, satellites above, crisp clean, 6 hours from volcanic catastrophe, natural off-topic setting, wooded similarities to desert tendencies, roving gambler wandering about, less a game, more hyper-aware, reflective grinning glare, still slight shiver in temperature, quick flick, spark and flame lonesomely quivers, odd hour coffee endeavors. Because I think while I wrote this, I was waiting 45 minutes or something for coffee to arrive, because I've been ordering a lot of coffee, and drinking a lot of coffee. And then, yeah, I've been listening to a lot of audiobooks lately. The most recently listened to fully one, it started when I was on the drive here. I listened to the entirety of Freud's, it's on war. Anyway, I was listening to a book called A Brief History of Realism by K.J. Smith, and so I wrote a poem on that too. It's objective observation over antithetical fantasy, everyday, ordinary, contemporary experience, rejected grandiosity, shifted focus, first-hand detail, freeze-frame portrayal, pressure-shifted depiction, textural, unrefined scenes, acting for articulate memory. As well as that audiobook, and this is my favorite one so far, even though I've read the book before. I've read the book more times than I can fucking count. I read it for the first time when I was in first grade. I saw the movie in theaters with the person who's now dead, but it's a great movie. It's a great book. Tolkien is one of the best he's the greatest writer I've ever read. So I've been listening to the audiobook of The Hobbit, narrated by Andy Serkis, who plays Gollum in the films that Peter Jackson did, and it's great because he does the Gollum voice in Riddles in the Dark, and it's the best fucking thing ever to listen to, in the middle of, in this book, Andy Serkis doing the Gollum voice. It's absolutely incredible. I love it. But anyway, so while I'm listening to it and stuff, my mind keeps coming back to this thing that Bilbo Baggins said in a sort of questioning manner, where he's like, incineration, and it's while he's reading his contract aloud and it shifts to a sort of higher vocal octave, and as the film portrays, and it seems sort of fitting as the dwarves then go on to explain, quote, and poof, you're nothing but a pile of ash, unquote. But then this is where my mind starts going. From ashes spring new forests and ages, like the woods around Mount St. Helens, or rebuilt Chicago after a massive inferno. Then it gets grown up it gets rebuilt to burn again and again and again. And then of course included in that sort of imagining of is sort of scenes of incinerating planetary energy, sort of like the aforementioned volcano, or a quick burst of breathed flame from the breast of a dragon like Smaug, or from the mushroom-shaped plume obliterating and charring bodies into smoke, into shadowy outlines like ash-sculpted hollow ghosts in Pompeii. A singe of incredible pain, and then cut to black in the detonation of an atomic bomb. I'm reading this so terribly. Whatever. I don't really care. Though it was written prior to the race for the nuclear to acquire nuclear powers, and not even being published in the United States until 1938, that Smaug and Erebor could be some sort of a metaphor to the nuclear arms race, would be an iffy choice of posit, but nonetheless, the general principle of Tolkien's writings and an attempt at creating a new mythology for Europe is a high emphasis on food and cheer, delightful vital revelry, and simple work but plentiful existence, which is viewed as having more of an enriching value than feuding lords and lieutenants over hordes of gold and shiny superficial materials with supersedingly bigger weaponry. There's always a bigger fish, bigger stick. But simultaneously, however, those simplicities of life would seem to be the drive for even such conflicts. 3 F's being motivation for almost any action taken by any entity of any hominid species, individually and abroad. Long-term combat coming down to the brass tacks and bare minimum of feasting, fighting, and fucking. The feasting and fucking then leading to said fighting. However, hobbits coming about it in their own way, but ultimately their docile nature comes down to being a form of mini-man who's self-domesticated to such a comfortable extent and leisure that any feud is tantamount to sort of a average neighborly or familial dispute. It's sort of like, while there is importance placed on objects like forks or doilies, it's in the same sense of family heirlooms, still practically useful, though. Objects with aesthetic attractiveness to suit them, and then stand-ins for those tendencies of the 3Fs, sort of keys to the castle with simplicity imbued. However, grandiosely, the more gold, the more food and whores to continue, riches accessing without anything, anytime, anywhere. And as can be seen with cases like the Epstein class, those like Thror would amass unimaginable quantities of wealth and become bored. Tolkien called it dragon sickness, and I would personally attach the real world term of nihilism and hedonistic excess to what it is. Though some might threaten some might threaten nuclear Armageddon over the gold, like Smogwing laced the Lake Town or Dale residents, like recently with the American commander-in-chief, who gave a heavy implication of using atomic weaponry and annihilation of the entire civilization of Iran. Dragon as allegory to that developed sort of destructive technology as time goes on. It could be taken and then there could be more of it taken from the Silmarillion, where something like the Trinity test building up to the Tsar bomb could be tantamount to Morgoth's continent obliterating and Calagon the Black in comparison to the younger one under the Lonely Mountain, in terms of dragon sizes and stuff. Though I guess with Tolkien that would be sort of a reverse order. Anyway, which led me to a poem. Imagination of incineration, reams of desolation, last instance of spectacle, fiery death egregore. From the past until completion, they'll turn away no more. Mass final blast, blinded last grasp, rasping for last intimate clasp, heads held engulfed in flaming ash, vagrant dancing alone in the aftermath. In my mind and in my car, we can't rewind, we've gone too far. And then that's the end of that. And then sort of association with that, I started rewatching the Netflix adaptation of Gerard Way and Gabriel Ba's comic series, The Umbrella Academy. And so being greeted again to the introductory opening scenes included where someone has a record player and they start playing the song I Think We're Alone Now, and then all the Hargreaves siblings begin dancing in their own little niches separately. Sort of a fitting song for it, and all in the wake of the death of their adopted father, Sir Reginald Hargreaves, who's also an alien, sort of just letting the tune flow through them to their own groove. And it's, I guess that sort of reminds me of how I take coffee walks and stuff. But yeah, anyway, that's that. That's what I've been watching and stuff, along with Better Call Saul. Then I watched this weird movie about this supposedly true story about some weird Luciferian cult. It seemed very embellished, though. It was very in your face with the violence and stuff. It was very interesting. But anyway, yeah, that's been rambling and reading, stuttering through this. I haven't done this in 3 weeks now, 2 weeks. So I'm very weird with it right now. So yeah.